So we talked about Jesus being the one way to heaven. So what does that mean for people who perhaps lived before Jesus, people who had never had the chance to hear about Jesus? What about them and the afterlife for them?
I'd want to start by saying again, I am not the judge in these cases. None of us are qualified to do it. So it sounds like a bit of a get out answer to what I'm saying, but actually we can, and it is a great relief to me to say, actually pass this over to God and say, and I know that because he is totally perfect, totally loving and totally gracious, that actually he will be the best judge for everyone, even in situations where we don't know what the outcome's going to be, that I can trust God to make the right decision because he is ultimately trustworthy. So bit of a get out, but I think it's true that we can actually leave this to God. However, I think there are some things that we can also say about this situation as well. So firstly, in terms of, well, what about those before Jesus came? Well, a very, very big summary of the Old Testament is that we were created, we messed up, we chose to try and be God rather than to be in relationship with him as his created beings. And then the whole of the rest of the Bible is God's kind of emergency mission to save us. Okay, and leading up to that, so going up to the time of Jesus, there was kind of saying, look, I want to be with you, but there needs to be a sacrifice made for the stuff where you've got it wrong. And so there was this kind of whole sacrifice system with us giving sacrifices of animals or birds or like a tithe of a harvest or whatever, all to kind of actually signify the fact that a sacrifice needed to be made, and it couldn't be us. Because God didn't want it to be us. In fact, it can't be us because we're not perfect. But then actually that was all pointing towards the person of Jesus, who actually came to be what we would say the ultimate sacrifice, which is to die in our place, to be that sacrificial lamb, if you like, to do that and then to bring us back into relationship with God. So all of that stuff that was happening before Jesus was effectively God saying, look, trust in this, trust that I am going to do this. And then Jesus, of course, died once, we believe, once for all, like throughout time, he did that one thing. So I think you can say that for people who were following God in that prior to the time of Jesus and trusting in his promises or whatever, I think it would be reasonable to think that God would want them to be in heaven with him. Afterwards, of course, after Jesus died, and of course it's a big worry that, oh, what if my relative or my friend or whatever died before hearing about Jesus? What about people in remote tribes and people across the world and countries that haven't yet been told the gospel? What will happen to them? Well, firstly, I would say that we don't know exactly, like we were talking about in the near-death experiences, we don't know exactly what happens when you die, but there does seem to be this ongoing thing of the soul. And we don't know if those people will encounter God at that point. If God could, we believe that God can do anything, so he could present himself to them at that time and they could make a decision at that stage. We don't know. So we have to be a bit, what I would say, agnostic about it, just to say, look, hold our hands up and say, we're not sure about it. But also, again, coming back to my first point, that God can be trusted to do the right thing. And that for me, for friends and family who died without knowing Jesus, from what I can see, it brings some reassurance that God can do the right thing, and we don't know exactly what happens when you die.
I'll just add to that, within sort of Christian theology and the ways that we try to explain how we see God at work in the world, there's this idea of general revelation and special revelation. So general revelation is the idea that someone can walk outside and see the sunset and have this immense sense of the beauty of the world, and that pointing to, perhaps there's something more, like just the beauty of the world. And that is an arresting thing. So there are ways that God has revealed his fingerprints on creation through general revelation. And so, I think that's a great thing. And I think we see that, I think it's in Romans chapter 1, where it talks about God has made himself known just like in the way that the world had been created. And then that leads that person on to a search for who is this? Who is this God? And then you get this idea of special revelation. So things like, the person of Jesus himself, where God is more clearly. You can see God more clearly speaking. And so for people prior to the time of Jesus, people now in different parts of the world, we don't know how God is working or moving in their lives. And I think one of the fastest growing churches is the church in Iran, where you'll hear lots of stories about people converting to Christianity because they've had dreams about Jesus. Like, in a place where perhaps Christians couldn't maybe go and like openly talk about Jesus, God is doing something in the hearts of people. So we don't, as Ben was saying, God is the ultimate judge. He knows what he's doing. But I want to push back on this question slightly and say that if we ask this question, what about those who've never heard? What is the motivation for asking it? Is it because we don't want to deal with the fact that we have heard? Yeah. So my question is, now that you have heard, what are you going to do about it? You know? So, and also for me as a Christian as well, it kind of jolts me out of maybe sort of my sort of Christianity light, just to sort of bumble along. I know God, to actually tell people about it, share my faith. And that doesn't mean, you know, standing with a speaker box in the middle of, I don't know, Oxford Circus saying the end is nigh, but actually just sharing my faith, talking to people about it, you know, what we're doing today. Because if it matters that much, if we're talking about afterlife here, if this is deep stuff, if it matters that much, then surely I would want other people to know. And so if this is a question that bothers you, and I think it's a really good question, I would ask you, what are you going to do now that you've heard?